The creator economy in the US has been exploding for the last 5 years. I've moved back to Barcelona after living in Los Angeles for a while, and what I found here in Europe is kind of different. It's a much smaller industry that is not exploding as much as the US. But why is that? Why is the creator economy in Europe not growing at the same pace? A couple of years ago, I got a message from the Colin and Samir subreddit. They were inviting me to give an AMA, Ask Me Anything, in their subreddit. The person behind that message is Valentin, a content creator based in Vienna that has a background on cinematography and film. In recent years, Valentin has focused on building the creator economy in Europe. He's the host of a community called Orbit for Creators that's focused on connecting solo creators. I want to ask you, because you've been involved in different communities, right? Yeah, I think it was Colin and Samir with their subreddit, Matt Diabella. Tell me more about this.
That was the course I took originally, and I just became super active in that community, establishing myself as a moderator, basically, and just like making sure that everybody has a good time, organizing a lot of online events because that was during the pandemic. So it's just like, it's nice to have, text interactions with each other, but why don't we just have a Zoom call together? That sounds fun.
Right.
And it was fun.
So you've been involved in the different communities, some of those in the US, and you are based in Europe, and your channel now, you're building that in Europe. So I'm really curious to hear what your thoughts are between the differences in the creator economy based in the US and the creator economy that we're building here in Europe.
Yes. I love that topic so much because I grew up in Austria, and then I spent a couple of years in New York, really understanding the media landscape there. And obviously the creator economy is hugely influenced by American creators. No doubt about it. They know how to make great entertainment and how to make entertainment a business. There's many other ways to be successful or to make money or be more sustainable. And I think that is one of the key differences that I see between a lot of US-based and non-US-based creators is there isn't a constant need for growth.
That's interesting. So you say that people in the US or creators in the US are more ambition-driven, like they want to grow bigger and scale bigger their businesses than people in the US were like, people in Europe were like, if they find a place where like they're comfortable and things are working, they don't necessarily need to scale that to the biggest like Fortune 500 companies. Is that
exactly? Yeah.
And you've noticed this working with creators?
Yes. It's a general cultural thing in the US that it's all about growth, bigger is better. I mean, it's a very broad generalization, but I meet so many people who, they don't need to conquer the world. They just need their own little kingdom and are happy with that.
I think in the US, because all the platforms are there, all the brands are there, most of the brands are there, it's very easy to build networks and to start like building new businesses out of those businesses and stuff like that, where there's a bit more of an industry there, I would say. Like I've lived all my life in Spain, Europe, then I spent some time in the US, in LA, and I could tell like in 1 year, I was like getting connected with like all the top creators, like people from the Eric team, and that they were building the Creator Now community. Then, like all these different or Chris Do with the Future, like all these different communities, like they're building businesses that are really profitable and they're growing big. Versus in Europe, I don't see that much of an industry here. I see more, like you say, like individual creators or like tiny businesses that they're making enough money to sustain themselves and like make a living out of it, but they're not building these huge networks or huge like Dude Perfect or stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have that same.
I mean, that's a general, Europe conundrum because it's much more fragmented. Even there is no metric for Europe in anybody's backend. It's just all the individual countries, right? I see viewers from Germany, from France, from Spain. I wish I could have a button that says EU, give me the whole market, but I don't see that. And,
Right.
That's maybe part of it, that we think about what's in our front yard, so to speak, because even you talked about brands, and like I've had my interactions with brands, and very often they have their own representatives for each country. And so if I get approached by a company, they're interested in what can you do for our market, which is, maybe just Austria, maybe it's Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, but that is a market that is interesting to them. Whereas as a creator, my region is the world. I want to attract people from everywhere. And, when it comes to selling to them, it becomes a little bit trickier because everybody has their own preferences or needs, or, we get into target demographics, like how do you talk to specific people, right? And I think that's a big difference to the US, because you can still look at the US as one big market.
So that's a downside a bit, I would say, for Europe, like this, how fragmented it is, right?
Yeah.
I think in the US, it is actually like one big market, and it's easy to move around. In Europe, there's not just different countries, different regulations, stricter regulations than in the US, also for data, for example, with GDPR, and for things like copyright. For example, with fair use in the US is way more flexible than it is here, for example, and stuff like that. So there's a bit of like there's a bunch of difference, I would say, between the two markets. But I think what's interesting in Europe as well is like there's always been this tradition of like, even like in Hollywood, like traditionally, the US, it's been more like entertainment driven, like more mainstream. And then Europe, it's been more like outdoor driven, if that makes sense. And there's a race, I think, in YouTube in general for that type of content, and like more outdoor driven, like this more personality driven type of stories, and more personal stories, I think. And what's interesting in Europe is that because of this fragmentation, which you can see it as a pain point, which I think it is in a way, in terms of business sometimes, but also there's much more richness in the diversity of stories that you can find in Europe. So I think for brands, it's interesting I don't think there's one better than the other one. I think, for example, if you want to go big and like you have the dollars to do that, like maybe working with creators, brands, or the creator economy in the US might be a good chance, like a good idea for you. But also, if you want to find creators that are more, that like dedicate more to their craft, and like have different like points of view and different stories in different cities and stuff like that, Europe is also a very interesting market for brands to engage with, I think.
Yes, 100% agree. And I think that diversity is so important and creates so much value in itself. It's almost like, I don't know if that's a great analogy, but like it's the difference between buying a giant billboard on a highway that everybody's going to see, or you put a poster up in your local community center that really speaks to the people who go there, right?
Interesting.
It's a smaller market for sure, but it's much more, there's much more depth there. The depth of connection is definitely there.
I can tell you about like numbers not adding up, because I'm based in Barcelona, I'm based in Spain, and like if I'm creating content in Spanish, the RPMs and like the numbers on YouTube, like what YouTube pays you for AdSense and all of that, is like so much less than if you were creating content in English, for example. And that's an interesting situation. And not even just like Spanish versus English, but also LATAM, like Latin America versus Spain, there's also like a huge difference. I was talking with some friends of mine. They have a network called Slurp Network, and they are managing the channels of the biggest creators in Spain, basically like Ibai and like all the top creators in Spain. And they say that like even if you speak the same language, if your content is catered to Spain, your RPM is higher than if you were to, like talk to Latin America or like countries that, have less buying power, basically. And so that is huge when it comes to like thinking about how to build a creator business, and for brands also how to engage with different creators, how much that's gonna cost them, and how much marketing budget or brand budget they need to invest.
I think there's just an opportunity to find different ways to engage or look at different metrics that are relevant in that market, because it is a huge market and it is, they're all undervalued, right?
Yeah, which is there's a part that I understand of it, because like, why would you do it in Spanish if you can make more money in English?
But here's the interesting part and how we can actually bring that back to community, because I've had a few interactions recently where I'm planning to also host in-person events this year. I bring people together in physical space, and whenever I mention that to a brand, they're like, "Tell me more. How can we get involved in in-person events?" And it's like, I mean, I'm excited about it, but it's not masses. It's like 20 people, 50 people maybe. But because you bring them together in person, there's a whole nother level of engagement there. And I think the
100%.
same is true for regional content. I mean, my friends at CreatorPad, I don't know, I'm plugging them now, but they're building a platform where local restaurants or really small businesses can collaborate with micro influencers in that specific region, because that drives actual traffic to a shop, right? Because it doesn't need to reach 100,000 people. It just needs to reach the 50 right people, and everybody wins from that.
That's actually true. Especially, I've seen that in the world of B2B, for example. Like, you don't need a massive audience to make money. If you're, especially in B2B, like entertainment is different. But like for me, for example, I don't even have 2,000 subscribers yet, and I've been able to close a couple of partnerships already that I'm very like excited about and I'm like very proud of. And that's money in your pocket. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need like a massive audience, and that's a good point. And especially for languages that are not English, that's what most of these businesses rely on. I was talking with Heretics, which is a like esports team. They're based in Spain. They're huge, and they also have like a production company. And a lot of the stuff they do, like, they have to rely on brands. Like, that's like, they need to pitch stuff for brands, and they need to create shows for brands, which is really interesting. But like, it's just, I think it's a different mindset, because also the buying power of the community is less. So for example, I think in the US, it's way easier to sell stuff. For example, if you are selling like templates or stuff like that, it's way easier to sell that in the US, because people are more willing to spend, or even like online programs or educational content, stuff like that, than other regions. I don't know, Europe in general, how.
But I have another great example for you, because one of the first things I made money on the internet was I made a character sheet for Dungeons and Dragons. It's a board game.
I know what it is. No way.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
But I got so much into that D&D recently, like this last year, I got into it. So
Okay,
yeah, we can talk
that's a rabbit
off
hole
the
to
record.
explore off the record. But through the community, we translated this character sheet into pretty much every language that is relevant, Spanish among them. And the community was so grateful and so engaged for that. And the whole thing was pay what you wish. So you can have it for nothing, or you can pay 10, 20. I think the most I've ever gotten was 50 euros for
That's all.
a simple download, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's the market, like the people who do have that, the spending power, are happy to pay that money if you cater to that market. And there's so much gratefulness actually there when you do show up in that market.
Love it. So let's talk about community, since you're mentioning it. That's your strength, and I want to hear like what your thoughts are. Because I want to kick it off with one sentence. It's talking with the people at Heretics the last week. Because I'm about to direct a master degree, a university master degree on the creator economy, basically. And so I'm connecting. Thank you. I'm connecting with the top people in the industry, to create a team of, like, for faculty, basically, for like team of teachers that like will train students, right? And so talking with them and trying to like build a program, I was interested in the content, like how they do the content. And one of the things that really struck me, and that's probably because of like my bias and like my background on film, like I'm like very like content, like actual like film like driven or storytelling driven. But he said, we can talk about content as much as you want, but the one thing that matters really is community. And it kind of like hurts me. It's like, oh, but like if the content is good, but no, it's like if the community is interested and is solid, like that's what makes the creator, right? And so I'm really interested and passionate about learning more about community. So yeah, what can you share with us?
There are different definitions of community. A lot of creators specifically talk about their audience as a community.
Right.
For me, a community means that it's not just one person talking to 100 people, but all those people talking with each other. That to me is community. And I mean, it doesn't even have to be that big. I think tying back to the beginning, what makes a creator successful is having other people around them. Like nobody succeeds on their own. You need that social feedback loop to become better at the craft and evolve content to a point where people care about it.
What turns an audience into a community?
Yes. Oh, wow. It's very simple. You just interact with people on eye level. That is what I've been doing for the last 3 years. If anybody sends me a message and is like, hey, I'm a creator, do we want to chat? And I'm like, yes, let's have a call. And just like listen to where they are in their journey and give them exchange experiences. That is how I've been building my community from the ground up. And then, through content, delivering videos that are actually relevant to them, really catering to their interests, to their needs, and surfacing people that they might know. It's like, when you had a band that you listened to that nobody else knew, and then like you meet some other kid who's like, oh, I know that band. It creates this instant bond. And the same is true if you watch a creator with like, I don't know, 30,000 subscribers, and you meet somebody else who's like, yeah, I like them too. It creates instant connection. And it's like, it puts us in a group of like, yes, that is the vibe that we want to have, because it's so much about vibe, what you put out onto the internet.
I love that. So yeah, that makes me think, because usually for me, it's like first the content. And then as you start building an audience, you start finding ways to like, first of all, connect with them individually, but also help them connect with each other.
Yes.
That's have I've always thought about this.
Yes.
But now you're saying, no, you build a community, you start connecting with people, and then you make videos to serve that people. And I think that's like a reverse approach, which I think it's very interesting.
And I think it works in parallel because, what you said, my basic job is connect people with each other. But to do that, I need to get to know them. And I get to know creators at local events, at online events, or when I have podcast conversations with them, right? But I need to understand how do they think? What is their vibe? Is that, on paper, two people might have a similar interest, but they have very different personalities, and I know they're not going to get along. Right? When you build a village, there has to be a common theme, a common understanding of what we want here.
Could that space be the comment section, for example? Or do you need more than that?
For me, for what I'm building, I decided to build a dedicated community space online.
Okay.
I think the comment section, especially if we talk about YouTube, you don't know who the other person is unless they are a creator. There's just like
fair
users 742.
Like you see like the C or whatever. You don't see an image or anything. It's just even...
Yeah. I mean, if they show up regularly, a sense of community can form. But how many YouTube videos do you comment on?
Right.
No. Yeah, but one a week, maybe, maybe none at all. So YouTube in particular is making some steps into building community. But I think if you want to create really like deep, a rich connection, there are other platforms that do that much better.
And you've been doing this for a while now with different communities, right?
Yeah, because that's how I got into the creator economy. I started with a course that had a community attached to it, and I saw how energizing it is to have people around you that are just as crazy as you are and want to do the same thing, and where you can really nerd out and talk about details. And one thing led to the next, and now I'm going to be starting my own community. So that's kind of exciting right now.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about your new community.
One thing I've noticed in the Colin and Samir subreddit was that so many people said it's great to hear from Mr. Beast, from Ryan Trahan, from all of the great big creators. But we also want to hear from smaller creators who haven't made it, people who are a more diverse group of people. And that is what I took as a starting point for my own channel, to talk to smaller creators, independent creators. And through that, I really found this sub-niche, if you will, of solo creators. People who create by themselves or maybe in a two-person team and are happy doing that. They have no ambitions to build a big team or make millions of dollars. They just want to share what they learned, maybe get some new clients, or just share what they're passionate about. And that is enough for them.
If we were to give people or brands watching this, like any tactics, specific tactics on how to start building really something they could do next Monday when they get to work, and give me one or two things that they could do to start building those communities or activating those communities.
For brands, I think there's many people who are much smarter in that area than I am. But what I would say is really pay attention to the people who are active in your comment section, on your, whatever you put out. There are a handful of people who really engage with what you do, and recognize them. Even if they don't have a following, they still have people around them that they talk to. Maybe they haven't uploaded the video yet, but they love your product. And just recognizing them, I think, is a huge step towards building that community, because they are the multipliers who make your brand feel human.
All right, this is a great way to wrap the episode. If you've been enjoying this conversation, I would ask you to hit that like button to let the algorithm know that this is good content so more people can see it. Obviously subscribe, and you have this video right here, which is another conversation that was really good that I think you'll enjoy. So click here and watch it now.